Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on the play Three Sisters by Anton Chekhov, which I read in this translation by Lawrence Senelik, who did his complete plays. And it is very good. It's a strong social drama. It slots very comfortably into the late 19th, early 20th century works, very comparable to what Henrik Ibsen was producing in his middle period, those social dramas. And I'm a huge fan of Ibsen. But this is a play I would recommend. I would recommend it to readers who are new to Chekhov, particularly readers who are new to his dramatic works, in part because it's such an accessible play. We're focused on one family. We have the three sisters of the title, Olga, Masha, and Irina by age, their brother, Andrei. We have a fourth woman, Natalia or Natasha, who marries Andrei and becomes a sister-in-law to the three sisters. And Natasha acts as this really interesting foil to the sisters. There is a dramatic and thematic contrast. There are many ironies in the interactions between the sisters and Natasha, and also in the interactions with everyone else there in the town, with Andrei, the brother or the husband, depending on who we're talking about, with the Russian soldiers and officers who are stationed there in the town. There are many ironies that exist, and that's a key trait of Chekhov. So this acts as sort of an introduction to Chekhov's ironies. And so it's very effective. It's also accessible in terms of the theme. We have an every person family. And we have a theme of social mobility versus social decline. The family of the three sisters and Andrei, their father was a general. And so there's a great deal of cachet and power he had, prestige. And what we see is a family that is now slipping from that prestige and slowly declining. And so that theme is very accessible. Yes, it is a Russian play with Russian characters in a Russian setting. Yet if we were to take it and transport it to almost any other setting, the drama, the theme would retain all of its power. The other reason this is such a great introduction as a play is because it acts as a novel in a certain way. Rather than having acts that occur across one day, so that the entire play sort of has that classical 24-hour feel, or having acts that are separated by one day, 1 week, 1 month, as we see in so many other dramas. Chekhov here drops in whole gaps of years between the acts in this play. And so we have this long dramatic arc for this family, for these characters, and it feels so much closer to a novel or a novella that readers are used to. And so again, it's just a play I would recommend getting into. But I'd like to share a few other thoughts now, once you have had a chance to read Three Sisters by Chekhov, because as much as Chekhov is creating this play about any family and this theme of social decline, he's very much getting into the same philosophical questions that Russian novelists and contemporary short story writers from across the century had been probing. Questions around, purpose. So let's explore that. In this town, knowing 3 languages is a superfluous luxury, not even a luxury, but a kind of superfluous appendage, a bit like a 6th finger. We know a lot of useless stuff. That's Masha, the middle sister, and she says a lot of funny things like that. The idea of superfluity is very critical. That was something that Byron had mentioned. It's something that Pushkin was explicit about within Evgeny Onegin. It's something that be like obsessed Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. And so here we see a character, a female character no less, saying that in Chekhov's play. And Vershinin replies, well, I don't think there is or can be a town so boring and dismal that an intelligent, educated person isn't of use. Let's assume that among the 100,000 inhabitants of this town, which is, I grant you, backward and crude, there are only 3 such as you. Naturally, it's not up to you to enlighten the benighted masses that surround you. In the course of your lifetime, you must gradually surrender and be swallowed up in the crowd of 100,000. You'll be smothered by life, but even so you won't disappear, won't sink without a trace. In your wake, others like you will appear, maybe 6, then 12, and so on, until at last the likes of you will be the majority. In 200, 300 years, life on earth will be unimaginably beautiful, stupendous. Man needs a life like that, and if it isn't here and now, then he must look forward to it. Wait, dream, prepare himself for it, and that's the reason he must see and know more than his father and grandfather saw and knew. And you complain you know a lot of useless stuff. Masha is taken by this. She takes off her hat and goes, I'm staying for lunch. And Irina, who is unmarried, replies, honestly, I should have taken notes, because they're so impressed by Vershinin and this exposition around this beautiful idea that, yes, even though their lives may seem superfluous or pointless or futile, Vershinin has this idea that there's this spark that these educated characters can ignite around them, and that over time there will be this social progression. and that the whole town will have changed. And I think it's interesting that he includes the number 12 in there, because we have this idea of 1 and then 6 and then 12 and then the majority, almost everyone. And I think the number 12 is indicative there of sort of the 12 apostles, that we have this sense of Christianity begins with a seed, then there are 12 apostles. And now look, nearly everyone in Russia, except of course, and Chekhov, his audience would have known this, those confined to the Jews confined to the Russian Pale, everyone else is a member of the Russian Orthodox Church. So of course this is, look, this is possible for us now, this theme of social mobility, this idea of education and its value. And that long speech by Vershinin acts as sort of a touchstone throughout the play, where characters will argue about the possibility for progression or the idea that no, everything really is just quite futile. And that is, again, a theme that seems so similar to other Russian novelists. Throughout the play, one of the ironies that exists, and if you've read many Russian works, you'll notice that periodically characters, particularly characters from an aristocratic class or who are more educated, will periodically use terms in French and then say, oh, they don't have a word like this in Russian, in our language, so I have to use French to refer to it. And that's sort of this sign of class, this sign of education. Periodically, Natasha will use phrases in French that don't make any sense. If you've seen Knives Out, Glass Onion, no spoilers, but there might be folks who, pretend to be what they are not. And so it's quite comical just to hear her like using these phrases for her little baby and then ultimately her son as he's a little bit older. And the three sisters are sort of looking at each other going, what is she saying? I don't think that word means what you think it means. And so we have those. We have one where she comes in, she goes, breastfed children understand one another perfectly. Good morning, I'll say. Good morning, Babik, darling. He'll stare at me in a special sort of way. You probably think that's the mother in me talking, but no, absolutely not. He's an exceptional baby. And the whole idea of Babik is somehow she's using the English name Bob for her son. The character who she says that to, Solyony, he's a very interesting character. He feels very comparable to many of the sort of anti-hero characters Dostoevsky was producing, or the sort of heroic characters Pushkin and Lermontov were producing. And his response to this is, if that baby were mine, I'd fry him in a pan and eat him. He then just walks off into the corner, and everybody's sort of just shocked at this guy. Later on, Tusenbach, a baron who's stationed there in the town, goes, where are the chocolates? And Irina, the youngest sister, goes, Solyony ate all of them. And that's a key little foreshadowing there. You've heard of Chekhov's gun. There's no Chekhov's gun in this play except for that little line there. And that's all I'm going to say. So moving deeper into the play, as we approach the ending, we have characters who continue to argue about this idea of, is life futile, is there this progression? And we start to realize that Natasha, as much as she's been mocked by the sisters, as much as she seems to still be beneath the sisters, is perhaps the only one who is finding more and more comfort in the society of this small town. So many of the sisters periodically reference Moscow, or various Russian officers will mention Moscow. And this idea that it's almost this dream that they can get to, that if they could just get back to Moscow, everything would be better. The sisters, as the daughters of a famous general, don't have the cachet now. Their brother, rather than being successful in either the Russian civil service or the Russian military, or even at the university, is sort of a failure on a couple of fronts. As time goes on, he's just accepted this position on the city council, and he's not even like the mayor of the town. He's just there on the council. It becomes clear that Natasha, his wife, is having an affair with the mayor. And that's why his presence is sort of tolerated. Andrei is gambling everything away. He's mortgaged the house they live in, which is not only his, it belongs to the sisters as well. He's mortgaged their house because of his gambling addiction. And so Andrei's failures sort of precipitate the family's decline. Olga, the oldest sister, wants so desperately to be married, and perhaps to be able to go back to Moscow, but to be married, and instead is being promoted to more and more power within the school system. And there's this sense of noblesse oblige that Olga represents, I think, that she reluctantly takes on this duty because it's her duty, because she's from a family that has a sense of social responsibility, not because she really wants to. She's explicit about not wanting those responsibilities early on. And years later, we see not only that she's been sort of asked to take on the role, but now she's stuck in this role and very unhappy in the role, ultimately. Masha has married young. She married a teacher who's educated like she is, only to realize that almost no one around her is educated, that her husband, despite being educated, isn't necessarily someone she's in love with, and that there are other characters that she could feel more connection to. And because she's such an intelligent character, she's able to realize and almost articulate the passion, the unfulfilled passion she experiences, and to ultimately initiate an affair. And Irina wants so desperately to go back to Moscow. It's like this dream that if she could just get there, everything would be fixed. Everything that's gone on across this past decade would be erased, and life would be so much better. And ultimately, there's a critical reference where a character mentions when the French burned Moscow. And I think that is sort of one of the salient lines of the play. There's the one about who ate the chocolates, but there's also this, and there are the ones about is life futile or is there purpose? But that reference about when the Frenchies burned Moscow. Because if Moscow represents the dreams, then if it's been burned, as it was during the Napoleonic Wars nearly 100 years earlier, if Moscow's burned, then the dreams are burned up. But one of Chekhov's ironies is lying there, because his audience would have known that there had always been rumors that the Russians had burned Moscow, sort of, cut your nose off to spite your face. And so regardless of who actually burnt Moscow, the audience is understanding that it's not necessarily the French who burned Moscow. It could have been the Russians. And so it's not necessarily some external force that has burned down the dream of these sisters. It could be their own choices, their own actions. And that is sort of the brutal subtlety of Three Sisters, the way that Chekhov sort of slides the dagger in, as he does so frequently and so skillfully in his stories or in his dramas. And ultimately, Irina does accept a proposal. It's not from Solyny, the romantic anti-hero, who is more and more across these years revealed to just be a dangerous, horribly unpleasant person that you would never want to be married to. And he's not romantic, he's just vicious. But she accepts a proposal from the much older Baron Tussenbach. Unfortunately, Solyny challenges Baron Tussenbach to a duel. And rather than a heroic duel with a heroic ending, or this romantic heroic duel, there's a shot heard, and we know that we're later told that Baron Tussenbach is dead. It happens off stage. It was in fact Solyny who ate the chocolates that day, and ate the chocolates and killed the Baron. And Irina's happiness is gone. The Baron's life is over. Solyny is persona non grata now, but it doesn't change the fact that everyone else has been destroyed around him. And so that sense of all of the dreams being just turned to ash, as Natasha, who's in a sense not dutiful and is very much a taker, is the one who seems happiest by the end. And here's how the sisters close the play. Masha says, "Oh, how the music plays. They're leaving us. One of them has gone forever and ever. We're left alone to begin our life anew. One has to go on living. One has to go on living." Irina, "A time will come when everyone will realize why all this is, what these sufferings are for. There won't be any mysteries, but in the meantime, a person has to live, has to work, nothing but work. Tomorrow I'll go away by myself. I'll teach school and I'll devote my whole life to anyone who may possibly need it. It's autumn now. Winter will be here. The snow will cover everything up. But I shall work. I shall work." And that sense of the snow coming in, and just as all of their dreams have been erased, the snow is coming in to erase everything that has happened. And really to erase all of the dreams. Yes, it's a fresh start, but it's a fresh start without the prestige, the foundation they once had a decade ago. Olga hugs both of her sisters. "The music is playing so gaily, cheerfully, and I feel like living. Oh, dear Lord, time will pass and we'll be gone forever. People will forget us. They'll forget our faces, voices, and how many of us there were. But our suffering will turn to joy for those who live after us. Happiness and peace will come into being on this earth. And those who live now will be remembered with a kind word and a blessing. "Oh, dear sisters, this life of ours is not over yet. Let's go on living. The music plays so gaily, so cheerfully, and it seems as if just a little while longer, and we shall learn why we're alive, why we suffer. If only we knew. If only we knew." And so there is this brutal catharsis there at the end, that they are accepting this fate, that this is what their lives will be like. Olga will remain a headmistress. Masha will remain unhappily married. Irina will also not be married. Her fiance has been murdered in a duel, and she is going to continue working either as a secretary at the civil service, where her brother is a menial as well, just with a higher title, and her sister-in-law is carrying on an affair with the leader of the city council, the mayor, or she'll go join her older sister at the school, where she will also be lonely and unhappy. And so it is a very brutal play, but that sense of Olga suggesting that even after all of this, yes, perhaps they might find the answer to why they're alive and why they suffer. Is their suffering ultimately going, to lead to this progression in their society? And I think Chekhov on some level felt that there could be, but he was always willing to, as I said, slide the dagger in and sort of remind everybody, but yeah, we're not there yet. Ward number 6 as a great, masterful story that does exactly that. And numerous other stories from Chekhov suggest those ideas. And so his stories are a great place to start if you've never read any of them. There are so many of them that are widely anthologized, and they really are excellent introductions into his mind and his sensibilities. I have read a couple of his longer stories. I read The Duel, which of course is relevant here, and I also read The Steppe, but I haven't read all of his longer stories or his short novels. The influences are very explicit within Chekhov. He's very explicit about characters referencing Pushkin and Eugene Onegin. There are references to Gogol and Gogol's works. There aren't explicit references to Dostoevsky, but I think it's interesting that we have 3 sisters with a sort of 4th woman who's an interloper in the family as the sister-in-law, similar to the way that there are 3 brothers Karamazov, along with Smerdyakov as the 4th, illegitimate brother. And the themes, as I said, are extremely relevant. There are huge connections, I think, to what Ibsen was working on in Scandinavia, particularly in plays like A Doll's House and his other social dramas, Ghosts. Brand as a drama thematically doesn't relate, but has that long break between the acts, which I thought was an interesting approach there in Three Sisters. There's a way in which this is a very dark vision of what's going on in Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. And I think I actually prefer, I'll be honest, Three Sisters to Sense and Sensibility, much as I enjoy that novel. And then finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the great social decline novel/film, The Magnificent Albertsons. This is one of my favorites. Booth Tarkington wrote the book, Orson Welles directed the film, and that's one of the great sort of visions of decay across time, and characters who sort of accept their comeuppance, accept their fate. In a sort of dark vision. So anyways, let me know if you have a favorite play from Chekhov. I will hopefully be reading The Cherry Orchard later this year, because that is my favorite play from Chekhov, and I'd like to sort of revisit that and explore some of the themes in that. But this was Three Sisters, and I really enjoyed it. There's also an adaptation, I want to say from the 70s, that is quite good. The American Film Theater did it. So hope everybody's doing well. Thank you.